Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining the Iowa Association of Business and Industry's weekly business report. This week, we have ABI Vice President of Public Policy, JD Davis, and Director of Public Policy, Brad Hartkopf, to summarize the legislative session now that the legislature has adjourned. So, Brad, what were the key legislative priorities that ABI worked on for this legislative session?
A number of the key priorities that we were focused on in 2022 included workforce, tax reform, infrastructure, and regulatory reform. And obviously, when we track as many bills as we do up at the Capitol, we had plenty to cover within those four priorities. And we are pleased to say that we made a tremendous amount of progress on workforce in particular. And unemployment insurance tax reform is something that got done this year and is something we focused on for a long time. So we're very happy with that.
And on the unemployment insurance tax reform, what does that bill accomplish, JD?
Well, there's been a lot of activity necessarily on the unemployment system in Iowa and on the Employment Trust Fund. We just are finding ourselves emerging from the pandemic that saw unemployment rates go above 10% in the state of Iowa, creating one of the greatest stress tests that system has ever had. And before we even get started on what goes on this session, we've got to thank Governor Reynolds for safeguarding that fund by putting hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of federal funds for getting through the pandemic into the trust fund to make sure that it kept its solvency. And great lessons came out of that experience. So we shortened the benefit time down to 16 weeks, putting it a month or so longer than the average time it takes to get back to work, making sure that can cover any seasonality issues that we have in Iowa for workers that work outdoors. And then also that effect would save $74 million to the trust fund each year, allowing that fund to be built up to a level that can sustain economic downturns. It also streamlines the process of what you do when you have a dispute on how somebody ended up on the unemployment rolls. For the first time, really defining what the legislative intent was when people find themselves in front of neutral third parties and administrative law judges to determine whether people should have benefits, should not have benefits. We think that process is going to be much simpler on the back end.
Thanks, JD. And what are some other workforce bills that ABI supported this session?
One of the things that happened in what people up at the Capitol were calling the second workforce bill was a piece that's in current law. It's the work-based learning program. And that connects school districts in Iowa with employers in towns in Iowa to expose kids that are in high school to the work situations that exist right there in their hometown. And where it's been used, it's been very successful. The constraints on that program, frankly, are overworked personnel in the high school systems that are required to oversee them and manage kids going and coming from workplaces back to school, making sure that everything's done appropriately, safeguard the kids as they're going through these processes. If we were to simply use somebody else to oversee these programs, the kids wouldn't get high school credit, and that defeats the whole program, makes it unworkable for kids. And so what was done by the legislature is create a path for someone that's not a school district employee to become certified over a period of a couple of years with some training on just taking care of the kids. And then that will allow more and more of these opportunities to be established. And finally, what we've done, and it's important to ABI, and this is going to be a nice little work program for Brad and I, we're going to get a report every year what school districts are doing this. And that'll allow us to go back out to our membership and say, is it worth the time? Do you think there's workforce there where we should stand some of these up in your town?
Great, thanks, JD. And Brad, what were some bills that ABI was able to prevent from being enacted into law during this legislative session?
A couple of bills in particular that we've been following include guns in employer parking lots. And this issue has been around for a number of legislative sessions. And what the bill would do is prohibit employers from having a policy in place that disallows an employee from having weapons on the employer's private property, specifically in the parking lot. And really, the proponents of the bill see this as a gun rights issue, and we view it as a private property rights issue, and that the employer, a private sector employer, should be able to maintain their rights and their ability to determine whether or not they'd like to have weapons on their property or not. We think it's fine if they want to decide to do that, but they should be the ones making the choice. That bill came out of the Senate Labor Committee earlier this year, but it didn't come to the floor. There was another bill in the Senate related to E-Verify. Again, this is a perennial bill, and it's a mandate on businesses, and we are encouraged that it did not come to the floor. The bill would impose very severe penalties against businesses who would violate the would-be law. In fact, a second violation would include a revocation of all business licenses for that particular entity. We don't think that's the right approach. We think the federal government should be stepping in to address this issue, and that one didn't advance. There are also a couple of other pieces of legislation that would have exposed employers to additional liability in the workplace, but they didn't advance either. So as far as trying to stop anti-jobs legislation, we were successful in that regard as far as being proactive too. So very good year on both fronts.
And as the policy discussions continue with ABI, this August we'll have our public policy committee meeting. So why is it important to get our members engaged in that process and just being part of the conversations throughout the entire year?
Well, it's critical that members get involved in the public policy committee process. And as you said, Steffi, those meetings are going to take place in August. But before that, we are going to have our regional meetings sometime in June and July, which gives members the opportunity to learn about the results of the legislative session from the perspective of the business community. We'll be going to Fort Dodge, Atlantic, Fairfield, Cedar Rapids, and Des Moines. We'll also be in Dubuque during our annual conference, and JD and I will be leading a workshop that talks about the results of the session and also previewing the elections coming up for both the state and federal level. And really getting involved in that process allows us to hear feedback from members to know what we should stand for going into 2023 and what are the key issues in mind that folks would like us to address. In August, we'll go through our public policy handbook line by line for our 5 committees, and we'll review each policy word by word, and we'll figure out what we're going to do as far as where the association would like to see us go next year. So it's a great opportunity to have your company's voice heard. We're a grassroots organization. The members tell us what we're going to stand for. And so we encourage all members who are interested in taking advantage of that opportunity. And there will be more information to come in future newsletters, as well as online at iowaabi.org, how you can get registered and involved in that process.
Great. Thank you both so much.